Now to the top stories of the day. We're joined by Sky News host and National Affairs Editor of the Daily Telegraph, James Morrow. Great to see you again, James. Welcome to the program.
Great to be here.
You heard my view there. You heard my view, James, on the debate. Linda Burney said, "Oh well, I'm too busy. I can't spend my time having a debate with Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price." I made the point that this is so important, according to the PM. Why wouldn't we have a leaders' debate or two or three in the lead up to this referendum?
Well, I mean, forget the debates, Stephen. Why wouldn't we have a constitutional convention like we normally have, before any sort of referendum? This whole thing has been rushed through from the very start. From the moment that the Prime Minister stood up at the Canterbury League's RSL to announce his victory last year. This thing has just been rushed through ever since. He assumed he could get through on the vibe. It's not working. Now, there's a rule of politics here that's playing out. If you're explaining, you're losing. That is where the government is right now. And they have to keep getting back on the back foot about this stuff because they didn't set out the markers for this properly to begin with. They didn't go to Parliament with a terms for the referendum itself that would be for the question that would really properly limit the voice to what it can talk to. So of course everything is going to be open slather there, and so of course they're in a lot of trouble, and that is why the thing is going down. People want reconciliation. People don't want bad feelings about this, but they know that this voice is constitutionally dangerous.
Yeah, and the PM tied himself up in all sorts of knots on radio today, and he confused me and probably all of Australia who heard it, saying that it would be a brave government that ignored the voice, and then in the next breath, he said if the voice asked to change the date of Australia Day, he wouldn't have to listen. I mean, how's that work?
Well, I mean, the reason why the Australia Day thing has been such an important issue is not because, of whether or not it would or we should change Australia Day, but it points to the fact that there's nothing that this thing couldn't weigh into. And with the presumption that they can weigh into it, there's also the presumption that the government has to listen. And so if the government doesn't listen and show and demonstrate that it listened, then, well, that's where you wind up in the High Court. And it can be about anything. So, for Albanese or anybody else to say, oh, well, it's not going to weigh in on this or that, he's got no idea. Because we don't know who's going to be on the thing. And we don't know what they're going to want to do. And there's no limits, practically, about it because the laws apply to all of us.
So if anyone thinks I'm misquoting the PM, here's what he said in regard to Australia Day and listening to the voice.
The voice says, we want to change the date of Australia Day. What do you say as Prime Minister?
What we say is that we have no plans to change Australia Day.
You'll say no?
We say we have no plans, absolutely. And what's made
But
clear,
you'll say to the voice no?
Of course we will. If we don't agree with them, of course we will.
James, if the no campaign doesn't clip up parts of that train wreck interview and use it in their advertising, they're crazy.
Well, I mean, I think they already are doing it. They've already, this has happened time and time again. You remember back in, I think it was January, when the Prime Minister went on Ben Fordham's program and had an equally contentious interview over this. And it's because they didn't explain and work this all out beforehand. And all of these supporters of The Voice, Professor Megan Davis, all of these people, they all say, hey, you can't shut this thing up. It's going to have a wide remit. It's going to talk to everything. So, then to go and say, oh, no, it's just going to be this tiny little thing when it's part of Uluru, which is treaty and truth-telling, whatever that's supposed to mean, then we know that this is really just a foot in the door for something much bigger.
I find it really amusing that the Yes campaign seems to think that all of the people you were just talking about, including, the major Indigenous spokespeople, they don't understand that such a thing as YouTube and the internet exists, and everything they've ever said in the past, it's there for someone to look up.
Well, exactly, and they haven't gone for, from the very start, because they rushed it. They didn't know what they wanted out of this thing, and they had all of these very hard maximalist activists on one side who have pushed the government into the most maximalist form of this document that you can imagine, so it can talk to anything. everybody knows this is just not going to work. And they're not going to believe Albanese when he says, oh, it's just a minor, modest request, when he also says, oh, it's a big thing and it's a brave parliament that ignores it. And when you've got people like Thomas Mayo out there banging the drum for reparations and tearing down the systems and, you know, praising the Communist Party of Australia and all of this other nonsense.
Let's talk about federal public servants in the wake of the big accounting firms inquiry. I mean, last week it was announced that federal public servants are going to be able to work from home for as long as they like, part of a new union deal. On top of that, they got a 10.5% pay rise. There's 10,000 extra bureaucrats. That's now 190,000 people working in the federal public service. Why then is the need to go to KPMG or PwC or any other of these big accounting firms and say, can you do the work for us and present it back to us, please?
Well, there's a couple of different issues here that you're mentioning. I mean, number one is this whole ridiculous thing where the public service basically decides they're going to be sitting at home minding their sourdough starters forever, you know, and copping really, really big paychecks and, you know, defined benefit pensions and everything else that they get, while the rest of us have to schlep off to work and, you know, do what we have to do. So there's that nonsense. It just goes to show the Commonwealth Public Service is now completely running the joint in Canberra. But then, you know, to then go out and go PwC, KPMG, all these guys, yeah, you go and do the hard work for us, come back. Well, I mean, seriously, if this government, if this Labor government was really serious about Commonwealth Public Service reform, which you'd think a Labor government would want to be, they'd want to pull some of that work back into the CPS and get that done in-house, save money for the taxpayer, and build, you know, our own skills to do this.